said, if you can't be a pine on the top of the hill, be a scrub in the valley, but be the best little scrub by the side of the rill. Be a bush if you can't be a tree. A garbage worker, a sanitation worker can be in ministry if they do the job well. A public servant, an elected official who cares about the people and serving, as Nina Turner said in the last hour, the least of these, they can be in ministry. Malik continues. If you can't be a bush, be a bit of grass, and some highway happier make. If you can't be a muskie, then be a bass, but be the liveliest bass in the lake. We can't all be captains. We got to be the crew. There's something for all of us here. There's big work for us to do, and there's lesser to do, and the task you must do is the near. If you can't be a highway, then just be a trail. If you can't be the sun, be a star. It isn't by size that you win or fail. Be the best of whatever you are. On our program, before we launch into Donald Trump and the outrageous idea that the president of the United States can change the name of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America, or seize the Panama Canal with the military, or ignore statehood for 600,000 African Americans who live in Washington, D.C., or annex Canada and make it the 51st state, but ignore that the people of Washington, D.C. have been fighting for statehood, and the people of Puerto Rico have been fighting for statehood. That would be 4 U.S. senators bringing Puerto Rico into the Union, bringing Washington, D.C. into the democracy, if they had statehood. But no, for Donald Trump, he needs more white folks in America. He wants to change the balance of national elections by getting some like-minded MAGA supporters across the border to join his movement. We're sensitive to that. But we're also saying before we get into that, we need to ground ourselves in a different spirit energy. That spirit energy, deeply rooted in the thinking of Howard Thurman and the Politics of Jesus by Aubrey Hendricks and the ministry of Reverend Bill Howard. Reverend Howard, welcome to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show.
Thank you very much. It's good to be with you.
It really is an honor to have you. Before we go to the break, can you share with us some of your reflections on the late Jimmy Carter, the 39th president of the United States?
As you well know, probably, Jimmy Carter and I grew up in towns about 8 miles apart. He's from Plains, and I grew up in Americus, Georgia. But of course, in my time, it was Jim Crow, Georgia. And I never met Jimmy Carter growing up, even though he was a prominent white citizen in Sumter County. We actually met when he was president. We met in the White House, and it was in connection with my trip to Iran during the hostage crisis. And subsequent to that, I would see him on occasion when I went to Americus after his presidency had concluded. And of course, he was especially post-White House, he was quite a beloved figure across the board in Sumter County. In fact, let me just say, just emblematic of that, I was down home to celebrate, I think, the 50th anniversary of the movement in Sumter County. And it took place in Americus High School, which in my time was a white high school. Now it was virtually all Black because once integration came or desegregation came, the whites fled to private academies. And so we were gathered there celebrating virtually an all Black audience, with the exception of Rosalind and Jimmy Carter.
Wow. He had a lot of courage.
Oh yes. And of course, the speaker for the occasion was the mayor of Albany, Georgia, a Black woman from Americus. So Jimmy really lived through a kind of revolution in the South, but he distinguished himself, as we all now know, by his service.
Yes.
Once he left Washington, that's a little bit of a glimpse of a memory. Jimmy Carter.
Thank you very much for paying that tribute. I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. When we come forward, we will be with Reverend Dr. Bill Howard. We will reflect upon Jimmy Carter, but we will also reflect upon his service to the movement and to our people.
It's afternoon drive time with Jesse Jackson Jr. Only on KBLA Talk 1580.
Somebody bring out the confetti, baby!
Starting Monday, January 6th, KBLA Talk 1580 has a new midday lineup.
I'm excited.
Are you ready for Tavis Smiley, Dr. Cornel West, Jesse Jackson Jr., D.L. Hughley, and E. Quarterly Corte back-to-back?
Oh my God.
Are you really ready for all this smoke?
I'm ready, brother.
Yes, we still have Dominique DePrima in the mornings and Zoe Williams in the evenings, but middays just got lit on KBLA Talk 1580.
We on fire.
All across America, people are talking about our new midday lineup. Starting Monday, January 6th, our KBLA 1580 app downloads are on fire because everybody's going to be tuning in.
Yes, I love you guys. You are the bomb.
Now would be a good time to hit up SMB at KBLA1580.com if you want folks to hear about your business or brand. That's SMB at KBLA1580.com. It's going up in 2025 on KBLA Talk 1580.
It's going up.
That's what I want.
We all hear the radio ads about the IRS. They tell you to be afraid, to be scared, and they try to frighten you into calling. I'm not here to do that. Tax Relief Advocates is different. TRA is here to tell you that if you owe money to the IRS, whether it's $5,000, $50,000, or $500,000, we have a solution. It doesn't matter if you're sitting in your car, at work, or with your kids. No matter where you are, call now. 800-550-9651. Don't lose hope. TRA can eliminate or reduce what you owe to the IRS. Generous programs are now available that can give you a fresh start. Our passion is taxes and helping individuals fix their IRS problems. We have over 1,000 five-star reviews on Google and an A+ with the Better Business Bureau. You don't need to be afraid of the IRS any longer. End your tax nightmare today by visiting us online at tra.com or call 800-550-9651. That's 800-550-9651. Tax Relief Advocates. Real solutions for real people.
Hey, Mom, I've been meaning to talk to you about some new COVID information I saw online.
Uh-huh.
I read that 3 out of 4 adults in the United States have a high risk factor for severe COVID-19. And Black folks like us with certain conditions like diabetes, heart disease, mental health conditions, or being 50 and older are at high risk.
Boy, you sound like a commercial.
I'm just saying. I know you love your ginger teas and essential oils, but remember, there are treatment options for COVID-19.
I promise if I get sick again, I'll call my doctor to ask about my options.
Sometimes I struggle to get to sleep. My body stopped for the day, but my mind is still running. So I take ZQuil.
ZQuil, the world's #1 sleep aid brand, has a range of non-habit-forming products to fit you and your family's needs. Invest in a great night's sleep for the best you tomorrow.
I'm awake and ready to take on anything.
Better days start with ZQuil nights. Explore our products at ZQuil.com. Use as directed. Keep out of reach of children.
Now back to more of Jesse Jackson Jr. on KBLA Talk 1580.
I'm Jesse Jackson Jr., and welcome back to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show. My very special guest is Dr. William Bill Howard. I've asked Dr. Howard to prepare our minds and our thinking for the struggle ahead. Dr. Howard witnessed most of the social changes that has occurred in the last half century and has some profound insights in the matter and the future of our resistance. Moses William Howard Jr. is an American cleric, former college president, community and business leader. He is known for his involvement in ecumenical organizations domestically and internationally and in international affairs, especially within the Middle East and Southern Africa. I'm going to introduce you, Dr. Howard, a number of times before the end of this show because your resume is just that long. Dr. Howard, help prepare our listeners for the struggle ahead. Have you ever seen anything like this?
Well, really, maybe not, because I was not around in the Reconstruction, a pretty perilous period. But we've seen major political, economic, and social as we say, backlashes, whenever there has been an advancement of African people in particular, we've seen this rise of resistance from the dominant white population. And I've lived through those. I came into the world toward the end or the waning of sharecropping. But from 1946 up until I went to Atlanta in the early 60s, I lived through a big chunk of Jim Crow. And I think what is different now is technology, the smallness of our world, and of course, the demographics that we see on the horizon. 2045, according to Brookings, is the time when the population tips toward a non-white population that is at least equal to the white population. But that shift is happening even as we speak. For example, during my time on the board at Rutgers, Rutgers was already beyond the mark of Brookings. And I think the communications capabilities, the way of promoting demagoguery, fake news propaganda, that's different now. And the urgency is perhaps different because, people can see it's within their sights. The other thing is, listen, Africans were never expected to be such high achievers. Other people of color were not expected to take their place in industry and politics and other brands of leadership. So my grandmother used to say in the heyday of the struggle down in Georgia, she said, son, have you ever thought if you were inferior by nature, they wouldn't need laws to keep you down?
Wow.
And now that the laws have essentially been abolished, not so much custom, and you see the rising of Black intellectuals, Black people in every sphere of life, research and science and space travel and whatnot. This is scaring the heck out of people who were fed the mother's milk of presumption of white superiority. And I think that is all very different now. And it's happening in other parts of the world, as you see, in Europe, because you've already had a prime minister in England or United Kingdom from India. So this is in our small world, the movement of populations. I think the level of urgency and the capacity for destruction has never been greater.
You mentioned Jim Crow. I've been a student of history myself, and I've argued that during first Reconstruction, from the Reconstruction Amendments 13, 14, and 15 of the Constitution to Tilden versus Hayes to Plessy versus Ferguson, if that is the period that we define as first Reconstruction, then literally everything from Plessy versus Ferguson to Brown versus the Board of Education is Jim Crow. You mentioned Jim Crow specifically.
Yes.
What worries me is that my generation, and even my father's generation to a lesser degree, we've only known consciously second Reconstruction. The civil rights movement occurs from 1954 through Emmett Till and then Rosa Parks and then of course Selma to Montgomery, the Civil Rights Act of 64, Selma to Montgomery 1965, the Public Accommodations Bill. We've only known the benefits of diversity, of equity and inclusion, where almost every new American immigrant group, minority group has benefited from the struggle that our people have paid the price for. And I was in a debate with a historian who was pressing for the case for a third Reconstruction, that third Reconstruction is coming, third Reconstruction is coming. And I reminded them that between Reconstruction periods, there is a period of Jim Crow. Any concerns in your thinking that the Trump era, because the walls of protection, the laws of protection are coming down, any concern that we could be entering into a period of Jim Crow 2.0?
Well, let me say the Jim Crow that I knew ended because Black people struggled against it. And whatever thing resembling Jim Crow that might emerge in America today is going to be met with the same, if not more intense, resistance. So whatever they throw at us, I mean, we are a blues people, as Miri Baraka would say. I mean, look, if we didn't have struggle and resistance and suffering, I might add, we would have no blues, no jazz, no gospel, no soul food, no outlandish fashion. You see,
Cornel West would say no Coltrane.
That's right, no Coltrane. Believe me, you wouldn't have Coltrane. And so I don't really. I know there will be potentially a lot of damage, a lot of negative things can go down as we face the future. But we are a people grounded in what Howard Thurman might call a kind of mystery, a kind of resolve, a kind of endurance, a kind of unexplainable joy. And I think we're going to be fine. I don't mean to downplay the intensity and the determination to negate our humanity, to try and reverse some of the advances that we've known. But if they think we're going to just lay down and take it and not raise hell, they're in for a rude awakening.
Aubrey Hendricks raised some concerns in his newest book about Christians being unchristian.
Yes.
That the rise of the evangelical has strayed very far from the gospel and is a Christo ethic that is clouded in white supremacy. Is there any hope? And I've always asked major biblical scholars and theologians this question, that the white community in America can ever produce a Martin Luther King Jr. type figure?
No. Let me say, any type of revolution or reform or transformation in a society must emerge from the bottom. People who live in privilege are not provoked, are not inspired to create anything new because, of course, they live in privilege. So the thing about, and Aubrey can teach us this, as a former pastor, let me just say, I always confronted my people with the question, what Jesus are you following? I'm not entirely sure that the white evangelicals in America, and there are good people who would call themselves evangelical, who shouldn't be confused with the right-wing crowd, but I'm not sure that they've strayed very far. I think maybe we have pulled the cover off of them, or they have been revealed more clearly. But remember, the people who captured us in West Africa went to church on Sunday.
Yes, they did.
And I dare say that on the ships that transported our people to America, they prayed, they read the Bible. And the Klan itself was based on some kind of twisted notion of Christian devotion. So which Jesus are we following? Are we following the Jesus of Nazareth? And I'm going to say that all Americans are faced with the crisis of living in and finding identity in a culture that is profoundly foreign to that in which Jesus lived. May I give you a funny reference?
Please.
We're both coming out of the Baptist church, and in most Baptist church, what do you call it? The declaration, I forget exactly, but they declare, what is that called? We used to say it every communion Sunday, the covenant. And it says, I will not drink, nor will I sell alcoholic beverages, right? You're familiar with that. Well, I actually, Jesse, went to Nazareth, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when I went to Nazareth, they took me to the home of the Archbishop of the Church of Nazareth. Well, Jesus of Nazareth, right?
That's right.
And he welcomed me into his home. Reverend, please come in. And he offered me a glass of wine.
Not a libation.
Right. So we've appropriated so many customs from other places, and really, the New England Christians, we brought a lot of things into our churches that are not Christian, but they're more cultural. And in that sense, I think the culture of much of the white church presumes white nationalism or white dominance. Now, you will meet lots of people who don't hold personal convictions about this, but they live with the benefits of the institutionalized structures that prefer and offer privilege to people of European descent.
I'm Jesse Jackson Jr., and this is the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show. When we come forward, we will be with Moses Dr. William Bill Howard, a great friend, an extraordinary mentor, and one of the revolutionary characters of the 20th century.
It's afternoon drive time with Jesse Jackson Jr. Only on KBLA Talk 1580.
I'm Amber Payton with 4 Things You Should Know from BIN News. President Biden has announced more resources for California to combat raging wildfires. The fires have caused 2 deaths, injuries, and damaged over 1,000 structures. Black New Orleans Mayor LaToya Cantrell is emphasizing the importance of the city receiving a Tier 1 threat rating for Carnival after a New Year's attack, bringing up to 1,000 federal officers from February 21st to March 4th. Brookhaven, Mississippi leaders have fired a police officer tied to a dismissed attempted murder case. A judge recently threw out charges against Gregory and Brandon Case, accused of shooting at a black FedEx driver in 2022 after a mistrial received. And Minneapolis Police Department welcomed its largest, most diverse class of cadets and officers in years, with 24 cadets and 8 community service officers sworn in. Over 500 officers have left since George Floyd's 2020 murder, which led to a new federal consent decree this week. I'm Amber Payton on the Black Information Network, your home for Black News First.
Del Taco's new Chipotle chicken burrito and bean rice and cheese burrito, packed with flavor, made with fresh ingredients, and found on Del's Real Deals menu. You heard that right. These burritos on a value meal with everything under $3. Look at Del Taco, hooking us up.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
The NFL is monitoring the wildfires that are burning in several areas inside the city limits of Los Angeles. The league wants to be sure of the air quality for Monday night's playoff game between the Rams and Minnesota Vikings at SoFi Stadium in Inglewood. The Rams were not scheduled to practice today. They have tentative plans to practice tomorrow depending on the conditions. The Chargers, who have a playoff game at Houston on Saturday, adjusted their practice routine today to limit the amount of time players and staff were outside. The Chargers are scheduled to leave for Houston on Friday. The family of Lakers coach J.J. Redick was forced to evacuate their home in Pacific Palisades Tuesday night. Pacific Palisades is one of the areas hardest hit by the wildfires. The Lakers returned to L.A. Tuesday night after their loss in Dallas. They are scheduled to play Charlotte Thursday night at Crypto.com. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. More news, opinions, and conversation when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
This is KBLA Talk 1580. Talk Radio. That's music to your ears. We're unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580.
Yeah, yo, come on. Pick up the drum.
At KBLA Talk 1580, we fight the power every day.
Yeah, gotta give us what we want. Gotta give us what we need. Hey.
I listen to KBLA and I love the commercials. I know what the commercials mean. I also, if I'm looking and trying to figure something out, I need something to talk to me that might hit me. And it happens on TV because, you know, every time they show a sporting event, they got the pharmaceutical companies back to back telling people how to fix the sickness on the same stuff that they sell them. So we get it.
Yep, we get it too, Chucky. And that's why at KBLA Talk 1580, we don't black down.
Drop it. Our freedom of speech is freedom of death. We got to fight the powers that be. Fight the power. Fight the power.
This is for all the folks who appreciate follow-through. Here's a quick recap of the KBLA Talk 1580 2024 Climate Justice Campaign. More than 6.4 million Southern Californians viewed our climate justice billboards and bus shelters. Another 1.5 million people listened to and or downloaded our weekly conversations with African-American climate experts. Our KBLA Climate Justice web portal had 2.8 million unique visitors. Thousands more attended our 7 climate justice community events. More than 9.3 million riders saw our climate care messaging on metro buses and trains. And 39 million Americans accessed our C-SPAN Climate Justice Symposium. All told, our 2024 Climate Justice Campaign exceeded 471 million total impressions. KBLA Talk 1580 thanks all of our 2024 Climate Justice partners: LADWP, Metro, Caltrans, Sierra Club, California Community Foundation, the California Endowment, LA City Council member Curran D. Price Jr., the California Wellness Foundation, MWD, AQMD, and the Port of Los Angeles. Caring about the climate, caring about the community, changing the conversation. We're KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
Hi, I'm Ray Richardson, your sports connection here at KBLA Talk 1580. Join me and my co-host Neil Scarborough every Saturday night at 7 for Out of Bounds, the show that brings some flavor to the world of sports for 60 minutes. We take you beyond the scores and press conferences. We give you our point of view, the way Black folks see what's going down. You can join the conversation and give us your analysis at 1-800-920-1580. Out of Bounds every Saturday night at 7 on KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black.
Like your style, though.
Somebody's been praying for me.
Thanks to the generous support of the KBLA Talk 1580 delegation, we were able to donate 545 pounds of coats and blankets to the LA Mission this winter season.
Hallelujah. Hallelujah.
The LA Mission expressed its deep gratitude for our gift all over social media, but we wish to thank them and all the other service providers who look out daily for the less fortunate in our community, finding our happy by being helpful.
Hallelujah.
We're KBLA Talk 1580, where we do more than just talk.
Somebody's been praying for me.
You're listening to Jesse Jackson Jr. on KBLA Talk 1580.
I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. and welcome back to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show, where my guest is the Honorable Reverend Bill Howard. Continuing with his introduction, after Princeton, Dr. Howard joined the national staff of the Reformed Church in America, RCA, in 1972, where he remained until assuming the presidency of New York Theological Seminary in 1992. During his tenure at the RCA, he served as an advisor to the Fifth Assembly of the World Council of Churches in Nairobi, Kenya, and as moderator of the WCC's program to combat racism from 1976 to 1978, firmly placing him in the Carter era. In 1978, at age 32, he was elected the youngest president of the National Council of Churches, and in that capacity at Christmas in 1979, he journeyed with Bishop Thomas Gumbleton, auxiliary bishop of the Archdiocese of Detroit, and the Reverend William Sloan Coffin, senior minister of the Riverside Church, one of the great opponents of the war in Vietnam, to conduct Christmas services for U.S. personnel being held hostage in Iran. In 1984, he traveled to Syria as chairman of an ecumenical delegation that accompanied the Reverend Jesse Jackson to obtain the release of U.S. Naval Officer Robert O. Goodman. Doctor, welcome back, Dr. Howard, to my program. Dr.
Yeah.
Howard, remind
No. I'm saying I'm here on the program with the Reverend Dr. Jesse Jackson Jr., who was there in Syria with us.
Yes, sir, I was. I
There
wanted
we
you
go.
you helped build a delegation, not just of Jesse Jackson, but if I remember correctly, there were Muslims and there were Jews, and it was an ecumenical group of people who believed in one God. I'm going to say the God of Abraham. And there was a spirit energy on that trip that you helped nurture. There were times when we were speaking to people who only spoke Arabic, and we had members of our delegation who communicated the spirit energy. And there were challenges with some of the Christian clerical people on the ground in Syria who were with Hafiz Assad. They were anti-American, but you moved them from being anti-American to being able to seize the moment that an ecumenical group, citizen diplomacy, could break through and make a difference given the heightened tension between Ronald Reagan and, at that time, Hafiz al-Assad. How did you pull that off, Dr. Howard?
Well, the truthful answer is I have no idea, right? but what I can tell you is human connections are vital. And I'll tell you a little story that may have escaped you because you were young at that time.
Yes, sir, I was.
When President of Egypt was killed,
Anwar Sadat.
Anwar Sadat was killed in the bleachers of a sports arena in Cairo. He was seated next to Bishop Samuel of the Coptic Church, which, by the way, was founded by Saint Mark, the gospel writer. And when the nation, as a kid, the nation used to tell me that Christianity was a white man's religion, I would remind them of the Coptic Church and the Ethiopian Church, both founded in Africa by the apostles. And I'm not talking about the apostles from 63rd Street or 125th Street. I'm talking about the real apostles, right?
The real deal.
That's right. Right. So Bishop Samuel was the number 2 man in the Coptic Church, shot down and killed by Sadat. I mean, with Sadat.
He was killed at the same time as Sadat?
At the same time. They're sitting there and the guys ride by on the trucks and just mowed down. So Bishop Samuel died with President Anwar Sadat. When I went to Giza earlier in those years, Bishop Samuel was my host. He escorted me around Egypt. I was a guest of Pope Shenouda. Now, note I say Pope Shenouda. We're accustomed to thinking of a pope as the Roman Pope. But the patriarch of each of the apostolic churches is, a kind of pope, an autonomous entity in their church. So I knew Bishop Samuel as Pope Shenouda's right hand. And when he was killed, I went to a memorial service for him in Jersey City. I'll make this short.
No, take your time.
In Jersey City, New Jersey, you have a significant Egyptian population. Maybe that's not very well known. But I went to an Orthodox church pastored by a friend of mine from the National Council of Churches, a priest, Egyptian American priest. And at this memorial service, the person who led the liturgy of the memorial service was a Syrian archbishop. Now, the Orthodox churches, I won't go into that now, but you studied a little bit, I'm sure, about the Orthodox churches. There's a lot of ecumenical movement among them in some quarters. So here was the Syrian archbishop. And when we arrived in Damascus that evening, I'm sure you will recall, we were welcomed into a big conference room where all sorts of religious leaders were gathered.
That's right. That's right.
And when we went into that room, the ranking guy among the religious leaders was this archbishop that I had met in Jersey City.
Mm.
And when we walked in, we didn't know what to expect. We didn't know who would be there, except these were religious leaders. The archbishop looks up and he says, "Bill." Now, in Georgia, at the Mount Olive Baptist Church, they would say, "That's the Holy Spirit."
That's right.
But the other thing is, you see, in Syria, although it was not plainly known, when we went to see the president of Syria, Assad knew your father from prior visits. In fact, when he was in Syria before then, he had gotten ill from something he ate. And the first thing the president said to him is, "Reverend Jackson, are you okay? I know that the last time you were in our country, you got sick." So that kind of hard to imagine, hard to predict human connection, the sense of solidarity. And see, I think African Americans in general, there are those who do understand, but the African American struggle and the condition of African Americans from the slave trade onward is something people around the world know. And we enter the room at least with a benefit of the doubt. It doesn't mean that we are let in at all levels, but we are given a certain benefit of the doubt. And I think that was operating in the Syria case. We had nothing to offer the Syrian government, but as you know, we achieved our mission.
You certainly did. Let me just say that as I close out this segment, we're going to come forward with Reverend Bill Howard, but I want to tell you a quick story, very quick. So the Syrians, the Orthodox, they know African Americans, and we know them. When my father in 1979 met Ronald Reagan, he came to Rainbow Push Coalition on 60th and 50th and Drexel. And he set out Ronald Reagan in my father's lobby talking to my Uncle Saint, who had a big afro and he had a big mustache. Mm-hmm. He thought he was Reverend Jesse Jackson and began talking to him for about 20 minutes. And he said, "Well, when we're finished, I'm going to take you back to meet Reverend Jackson." They don't know I'm here. I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. When we come forward, we'll be with Reverend Dr. Bill Howard.
While you're stuck in traffic, we can at least bring you up to speed on the news of the day. You're listening to Jesse Jackson Jr. only on KBLA Talk 1580.
If you need up to $3,000, go to WeFixMoney.com. WeFixMoney.com is the name you can trust. It's free to use, available 24/7, and you are never required to accept any loan offer. Some lenders offer same-day funding. If you need up to $3,000, type WeFixMoney.com directly into your browser. WeFixMoney.com has been helping customers for 15 years and has an A rating with the Better Business Bureau. So, if you need cash for credit card bills, car repairs, child care, or anything else, go to WeFixMoney.com. Make sure you type WeFixMoney.com directly in your browser. Go to the company you trust, WeFixMoney.com. Just fill in the information and get an answer in minutes at wefixmoney.com. For up to $3,000, go to wefixmoney.com. That's wefixmoney.com.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580, connecting you with services and solutions. The Autopsy Initiative provides a second autopsy free of charge for victims' families who have lost their loved ones due to a police-related death. The services offered through the initiative include the completion of a second autopsy, disclosure of preliminary findings, and a final autopsy report. A police-related death is when an individual is harmed by police officers using deadly force, which results in an individual's death. Police-related death includes in-custody deaths, including those that arise during contact with law enforcement officers during arrest, pursuit, booking, transport, or incarceration. The Autopsy Initiative has a team of board-certified pathologists on call. An autopsy request may be completed by anyone with a close relationship with the victim, which may include the victim's spouse, partner, relative, close friend, or lawyer. To request a free second autopsy for a victim of police violence, please visit knowyourrightscamp.com. That's knowyourrightscamp.com. Then click on Autopsy, then click on Request. At KBLA, we believe in justice for victims of police violence. We say their names, and we don't black down. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
My mom has decided to learn to paint, and she's good.
My dad's now into creative cuisine, and I've already put on 6 pounds. Learning new things comes with age.
My mom, she started forgetting my name and what we're talking about.
Forgetting well-known things doesn't. Memory loss may be a sign of Alzheimer's disease. Early detection gives you and your loved one time to plan for the future. Learn the warning signs of Alzheimer's at 10signs.org. Brought to you by the Alzheimer's Association and the Ad Council.
Now back to more of Jesse Jackson Jr. on KBLA Talk 1580.
I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. Welcome back to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show. My guest is Dr. Reverend William Bill Howard, a very close friend of my father's, a very, very important figure in African American history. In 2022, Howard joined with other residents of his community in demonstrating how a diverse community can live together, employing values of justice, fair play, and mutual respect. They've led community in conversations relating to reparations for the enslavement of African Americans, protecting public schools from efforts to limit instruction in the history and culture of diverse populations, affordable housing, opposition to book banning, gun safety, the township master plan, treatment of local students with different sexual orientations, and recognition of African American history in the region, all topics deemed vital to engagement of the kind of community that strengthens community. Dr. Howard, thank you for being my guest on the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show.
Thank you.
Dr. Howard, I have a son. He's 22 years old. I have a daughter who's 24 years old, and I'm 59 years old, so I'm closing in on 60. You're of my father's generation, for which I have profound and great respect. What do I tell my son? I mean, what do we tell our daughters about what happened in 2024? About an era that we thought had passed, with the joy that we experienced in the Kamala Harris campaign and the appointment of Ketanji Brown Jackson and the seeming progress that we made since Barack Obama that led up to Barack Obama. Quite frankly, it feels like we've come to the mountaintop and now maybe we're just on the other side of it, that something else is happening. And so maybe we're looking at a generation that knew not Moses, that knew not Pharaoh. And what do we tell our children, younger people, about the contribution that you've made, that others have made, so that we might experience the kind of freedoms that we do?
Well, that's a tough one. I think we have, in our struggle for freedom, very often struggled within a capsule or within a bubble. I gave a talk back in the early 80s to the North Carolina state branches of the NAACP in Raleigh, and I asked the question, are we fighting for a piece of a rotten pie?
Say
asked
that
the
now.
question.
You
You see?
saying something now.
And I think that you remember our struggle in the 60s, as pronounced by the great leaders, was really about inclusion in America. We've had prophetic voices, and especially Martin toward the end of his life, raise questions about America itself. And really, 2024 is pregnant with so many invitations to know more deeply about what ship we're traveling on. When Mr. Trump says he wants to make America great again, that's the subject for a full semester senior seminar. I am of the contention that in order to be a great country, I mean a great country, not a country with some great things happening in it, but a great country, number one, I can't be way down the list on unfair incarceration.
That's right.
Or so many people hungry and without work, so many people without medical. The United States ranks way down the list in education. You see? So the first thing we want to tell our children is we're in the situation we're in because we have two political parties that have been bought by wealthy elite people. And a very large chunk of the population, whatever their race, hardly have their daily bread. You can read almost anywhere that across the board, American households have a pittance of savings. If they lost their jobs, they hardly have enough to last them a month. And yet you have a rather dramatic increase in the number of billionaires. 1% of the people own the overwhelming level of wealth. The next thing is we got to get into this thing about how way back when the die was cast, this was going to be a white settler nation. The virtual annihilation of the native people, the way Africans have been treated, whether they were enslaved or when they were simply let go after slavery with nothing. And reparations is not a controversial issue, except when it comes to the sons and daughters of Africa. And I don't think there's anything more important that we can tell our children than to reignite what I consider to be a kind of lack of curiosity. We suffer not from ignorance, but from the lack of curiosity about the past and the lessons of the past. There's very few things happening to us in America that hasn't happened before. You see? And unless young people, well, I think social media, God bless social media, and I'm not one of those preachers who oppose modern developments, but social media is capturing our minds. People confuse posts on social media with organizing.
That's right.
And they confuse friendship with people they never met before. And the great changes we have forced on the country by our organizing and mass resistance and protests, we didn't have cell phones. So young people somehow, without our appearing to be resisting, modern development, here we are talking on a modern medium. We're in different parts of the country. That's all good. But the taking away of our curiosity and redirecting our minds to things that don't ultimately matter. And I would have to say, I am a person who believes in collaborating with every human being of goodwill. I don't care what they profess, religiously or otherwise. But I trust people who understand things do not begin and end with them. We are parents. We are parents. I'm more concerned now with my grandchildren than I am with myself. My wife and I jump in the car and we go to Brooklyn to see those girls in a heartbeat. Or we go down to DC to see that other girl. We got all girls, you know, as grandchildren. So it seems to me that we have to have some concern about something other than ourselves. That's a big deficit in our culture without respect to race. I mean, we're rearing young people who are thinking about what are they going to get out of it. My grandmother couldn't imagine Morehouse College. Your elders, your predecessors, they couldn't have imagined where you have gone, what you've been able to do. But they staked their lives on your getting there.
Dr. Howard, we have about a minute left in our program. Can you close us out on a word of hope?
I go back to the blues people analogy. I think hope is almost ingrained in a people who were kidnapped from their homeland and brought to a foreign soil and somehow learned to be human and to survive. And let me say, Black women are the only women in history who have been extracted from their native land, brought to a strange land without men who were able to defend them. And I'm talking, you know, pre-gunpowder days, maybe even pre-razor days, because Black women don't necessarily need us to defend them anymore. But in the days of slavery, when Black men were unable to protect Black women, the world experienced the evolution of a feminine personality in Black women that is so crucial to our advancement. And it doesn't mean men have to take a back seat, but it does mean that men must respect the partnership of women as we go forward. And I'm afraid that some Black men may have voted against Kamala or did not vote for her at all, did not vote at all, because we have this residual notion that to be a man is to somehow be tough guys in relation to women.
Reverend Dr. Bill Howard has been my guest for this hour. Dr. Howard, we want to thank you for your service to our country, for your service to our world, for your ministry, for all that you've meant for civil rights and social justice. We can't say thank you enough. In fact, somewhere I read, if I had 1,000 tongues, I'd say it as many times as I possibly could. Reverend Dr. Bill Howard, thank you for joining us on the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show, and we certainly hope to have you back in the future.
You're kind to have me, brother. Thank you. All the best to you. Right.
I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. When we come forward, we go right to D.L. Hughley. Honored and privileged to have Dr. Howard today. Thank you for joining us.